The leaders of the three major parties in Canada have never been less popular, at least according to an Angus Reid Institute that did a survey that did a deep dive going back through 50 years of political survey data. For the first time since 1974, all three major federal party leaders have approval ratings of -12 or lower. It's -12% for Conservative leader Pierre, -14% for NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's net approval has hit a new low of -38%.
The leader opposite is showing us exactly what shameful, spineless leadership looks like.
When will we put an end to this wacko policy by this wacko Prime Minister?
It was a choice to pander to white nationalists, not an accident. And it is a choice to continue to not condemn them.
Will the Prime Minister stop giving out insane quantities of heroin-grade opioids?
We will continue to be there to help heal people, not imprison them.
They are there to help kill people right now. That's exactly what they're doing.
Okay, so could all of that, what's happening in Parliament, be driving these negative views? And what about the potential fallout if this is the new normal for political debate in Canada? We're going to talk about that with the Power Panel. Cameron Ahmad is a former head of communications to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. James Moore is a former Conservative cabinet minister. Andrew Thompson is a former Saskatchewan NDP cabinet minister. And Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. And Shachi, we're going to start with you because you did this research. I mean, what differences did you find in this and what is driving this?
Yeah, so full credit to our research director, Dave Krasinski, who did the super nerdy deep dive. This actually took weeks of studying Excel files to put that trend line together. We're very proud of it. And also special thanks to the folks that maintain the Odyssey Public Data Vault, which is, I believe, the Ontario Libraries there's an association. I'll tell you the name in a minute.
Okay.
The point is, all of this data exists publicly. What we did was we tracked it, we plotted it, and what we were able to find is that for this point in 2024, going all the way back to 1974, it's not as though individual federal Liberal, Conservative, and NDP leaders haven't themselves been very unpopular. But the trend has always been there's a leader who's on the outs, but there's at least one or two other opposition leaders that Canadians look to and they say, we really like that person. We think they're doing a great job. We have warm feelings towards them. What we're seeing now is a sense that Canadians are turned off by all of these leaders. There's nobody that at a personal level they're rallying behind. So that sense of leadership, popularity, somebody that they want to rally around and say, that person's got the right idea. I like their style. I like what they're saying. I like their policies. We're not seeing a country that is dialed into any one of those major federal party leaders right now. And that is a departure from everything we've tracked through the 70s, 80s, 90s, aughts, teens, up to now.
Cameron, are you surprised by this, given the polarization we're kind of seeing in the political debate, sort of post-COVID, social media, decline of traditional media, post-Trump, all of these things which have sort of accelerated and magnified differences?
Not surprised, and I mean, you cite a bunch of reasons why that may be the case. I think it's largely a pretty depressing state of affairs, the way Shachi has laid it out. And I think all politicians and political actors need to take a step back right now and ask themselves why politics has become such a dirty word in Canada. But I think there are some things that we can identify as the reasons for this. And I'm not going to pretend that all politicians and all parties have some role to play and some responsibility to bear for the negative atmosphere that exists. But I also don't think that, and I don't buy into this notion that everybody is equally responsible. Let's look at the United States, for example, and we know that a lot of political trends and habits transcend the border. I don't think we can say with a straight face that both parties are equally responsible for the state of the negative, toxic state of politics there. Obviously, the Republicans and Trump traffic more in lies and conspiracy theories and negative attacks than the Democrats do. And I think that there's a similarity here, not to the same degree, but you showed that those clips of the Prime Minister and Pierre Poilievere trading barbs in the House of Commons. It is totally fair game for politicians and leaders to go after each other and fight each other on substance. It is less fair game, and I think pretty reprehensible, to accuse the Prime Minister of helping kill Canadians because of his policy on addiction, to associate with far-right fringe extremists, and to empower people like, the anti-vax movement, lie about the price on pollution, lie about other policies. And I think all of that negative politics sometimes works, and that's something that we've learned, If you try and character assassinate your opponent and you focus solely on the negative, it unfortunately can help your party succeed, and it can raise your numbers in the polls, even if it ultimately has the outcome of debasing the entire situation across the country. So I do think that there is, some blame to go around here, not to the same levels in all parties.
Okay, James, what are your thoughts on this quickly? I shot you. We'll get back to you. I just want to get James and Andrew in.
I mean, I could what about back at Cameron, but I won't. It's not the point of the conversation, I think. But it's easier to tear down a house than to build one up. It's easier to blow up your own reputation than to spend years building up your own reputation through good acts, good deeds, and sort of the imprint of your behavior over time. And it's easier to destroy somebody else's reputation with a little bit of gossip and a good attack campaign than it is to build up your own reputation. So I think the human nature, the instinct of things, and the quick path to victory through the destruction of the other is something that's been around for a long time. I don't think there's anything new about it. There's a coarseness and a sharpening of it, I think, because of the tightening of attention spans, partly because of social media and the way in which we consume things, and sort of, look at this car crash. Oh yeah, well, look at this car crash. Oh, I got a better one for you. Look at this car crash, and pushing phones in front of each other's faces to show the next ugliest thing. It's just a kind of a dynamic and a spiraling down of our society. I think one of the great problems that's going to hopefully we have to think about in order to get ourselves out of this tailspin is that, because that's the way politics has been trending for a long time, and it seems to be getting worse and worse, is that the kind of people who get attracted to that kind of an arena, those kind of personalities, the people who thrive and succeed in that dynamic, and those kinds of people are going to be the only people who are left in the room, and it'll spiral and spiral. I think ultimately over time, a market will open for an antidote and a counterbalance of, I think, a more tempered and measured approach to communicating and thinking about things. So I think over time, a counterbalance will present itself.
Well, that would be nice. I'm not going to lie. Andrew, Paul Wells has written a book about Prime Minister Trudeau that we're going to talk to him about in the second hour of the show. And he spoke to researchers involved with the Monk School who measure what they call affective polarization. Mm-hmm. And what you've seen really since the Mulroney years is there used to be people like, I don't vote for Conservatives, I don't vote for Liberals, but I generally like them and agree with them. And what you're seeing now, it's contempt and loathing. Like the binary is just baked in right now in our politics, and I think you're probably seeing some of that playing out here.
Well, there's a couple of reasons for that, though, and the job of being a political leader has changed. There's two things that you need to do as a political leader to be successful. One is raise money. That means you have to play to the base. The way that our party fundraising system is set up, it requires a lot of small donations along the way to continue to grow your war chest. That means you've got to speak in a language that riles up your base to support you. Second thing that's changed is the idea that leaders now want to have broad national appeal is out the window. And the folks that really threw it out the window were the Liberals. They became masters at micro-targeting. I don't really think that any of the policies that are sitting around the cabinet table are really tilted towards the voters at Fort Mac or in Red Deer. But they are very hypersensitive to what's happening in swing ridings in the GTA or in parts of Montreal. Those are the dynamics that are changing, and that's true for each party. You've got a roadmap to victory. You've got a roadmap of accessible seats. We're a highly fragmented electorate now. The Bloc complicates that because they take a whole bunch of seats out of play, but they also put a whole bunch into four-way plays. And so what we're seeing is the politicians going through very strategically understanding what are the issues that work in those specific ridings, what are the issues that drive the base to donate, and that's where it's at. And it's worth noting that although party leaders are underwater, if you only need 38% to form a majority government, and you've got two party leaders sitting, Poilievere still sitting with a 40% favorable rate, that's not an unsuccessful leadership. Is it good for the political dynamic of the country? I'd argue no. I mean, it would be nice to go back to the days where we're talking about big issues that drive the national debate, politicians that want to be loved. But that's not, in fact, what the job of leadership is today. And if you doubt that, go talk to Tom Mulcair, who got booted because he was not able to figure out how to motivate the base and not able, unfortunately, to be able to get enough of those swing ridings to move in his favor.
Okay, Shachi, I wanted to let you get back in here, but I just want to say Odesi is the Ontario Council of University
That's right.
Libraries.
I looked
Christina
it up
Lopez
too. Thank
downstairs
you.
sent me that information.
Thank you, Christina.
All right, you wanted to jump in, and then I want to continue the conversation in a different vein, but go ahead.
Only only to say, and I think James has already said it, there's nobody who owns the worst of this or is innocent in it. The Conservatives were masters in really hyper-negative attack ads during the Harper years. I have said on this panel many times that the Liberals have PhDs in wedgeology. Where we are at, however, today, and to Andrew's point, can you put the toothpaste back in the tube? Wouldn't it be nice to go back to the days of? We've got to go back to the days of. And here's why. Because trust in institutions, trust in things as fundamental as elections are starting to crater in this country. People now in this country, we used to think of it as a south of a border issue, now say, oh, you know what, I'm not really sure that I trust Elections Canada to deliver a fair election. These are the outcomes of the algorithmic aspects of it, the tech aspects of it, Facebook, Twitter, but also the political establishment in this country jumping on to the money part of it and not for 1 second taking a moment to think about what does this actually do to society, to democracy, and frankly to fundamental humanity.
But Shachi, I want to ask you a question on that, and I'll reference something that Cameron said earlier and something we discussed last week, I believe, on this panel, which was the decriminalization debate that is happening in British Columbia. Now, the issues, the public order disorder and order issues created by that are fair to lay at the feet of the politicians on the implementation. But to Cameron's point, Pierre Poilievere said they're killing people. He flat out said the federal government's policies are killing people. He only ever talks about British Columbia. The death rates are higher in Alberta, or on the way to being higher in Alberta, also high in Saskatchewan. That is about fentanyl, not about Justin Trudeau's agreement with David Eby to try decriminalization as a solution, right? Like, doesn't that make the politics toxic, that kind of approach?
The politics are toxic. The leader of the opposition's politics are toxic. His rhetoric is at times toxic. So is the Prime Minister's at times. There is enough blame to go back and forth. And a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this. And frankly, I watch it. I consume it every day, same as everyone else. I have seen the way the country has been. You talk about that polarization. Polarized and how the center has stopped from the middle. There are moments where any politician of any stripe can choose in a moment to say, you know what, I'm not going to take that bait. I'm not going to respond to that. I'm actually going to respond to things that have a sense of not otherizing, not putting down, not disreputabilizing people who disagree with me. We have politicians in this country, we have federal leaders in this country who are in a very with us or against us frame. I can't remember the last time anyone said, you know what, the people who disagree with me profoundly on a policy issue, which is something that I will die politically on a hill over, are not bad people. They're okay people too. They get up and put their pants on the same way as the rest of us do. We have lost any space for common discourse because common discourse has we're now at a place where others are dehumanized. I don't agree with you. You're not only someone I disagree with, you're a bad person. And that is completely part of what's happening with our political discourse today. And it's driven by our leaders.
Yep.
David, can I just jump in really quick?
Really quick, sure.
I agree with a lot of what's been said. And again, one of the first things I said is I'm not laying the blame at the feet of any one party. I think every party has to do a lot of introspection. And I think your poll and the research you've compiled gives a lot of material for parties and leaders and political actors to think about why this is and what they can do to improve it. But I also think it's a mistake to both sides everything. And to say, oh, because I have one example of one politician and another example of another, they're all equally responsible, when there is a clear record of one of the far right and the right-wing politicians in this country playing to the fears of people and choosing to try and amplify them as opposed to engage to a broader audience. And I think that's important to recognize as we try and break this down and understand where it's all coming.
Okay, James, just hold that thought because I'm going to play a piece of tape and then I'm going to come to you right on the other side of it because I think it's going to lead us to where you want to go. So I just want to play. This is some of the debate we've seen in Parliament over the last while. Just listen to this.
They are getting ready to tear up the Charter of Rights. And now we know the first right they're going to attack, a woman's right to choose.
I realized that you have no rights if you're pregnant. For the second time, Canada saved me by allowing me to have a legal and safe abortion for a future that I had chosen.
No government, no politician, no judge, no one should take that right away from you.
Okay, that's a series of ministers raising the issue of abortion after a Conservative MP tabled a petition earlier this week. Pierre Poilievere said he would use the notwithstanding clause to deal with criminal justice issues, has issued a statement that I will expand on further, saying they will not use it with abortion. But going back to the wedge issue that was raised by Shachi James, we have seen that over the course of this week when it comes to reproductive rights yet again. So your chance to weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to go again. The whataboutism. I mean, Cameron's done it twice now. I don't really want to get into this, but I mean, look, the reason why this happens is because if one voter is supportive of me, and it's really hard to get another voter, it's much easier to weaponize it to get that voter who's already with me so angry that they will drag their 18-year-old son out to vote for the first time, who maybe doesn't care. But because I've managed to get that first voter so angry that I can get that person to bring people to the polls. So to double down on the already existing voter is a much easier and efficient way to get support for you at the polling station. That's why all parties do it. That's just the reality. And again, respectfully, Cameron, with regard to the downtown east side, and people think that Pierre Poilievre is being too hot, I remember sitting in the House of Commons when I, as a British Columbian and a Lower Mainlander, as a Vancouverite, I was being accused of killing people in the downtown east side because our government and Tony Clement, when he was the health minister, wasn't moving fast enough to expand harm reduction policies. I remember being accused of threatening and causing the deaths of Canadians if we repealed the long gun registry. I remember Liberals running ads erasing the border between Canada and the United States if we went forward with free trade that Liberals ran. There's nothing pretty much more toxic to say of a prime minister than they betrayed and sold out and that they're a traitor to their own country. So again, you want to do the whataboutism. We can sit here all day and do this, but there's a reason why tactically parties go down this path. And it is ugly, and it does bring out the worst in people. So you are not sitting on a moral high horse, Cameron. You're really not. And if you sit up there high enough, you're going to fall off. It's going to hurt when you hit the ground.
I'm not claiming to, and I have great respect for you, your service.
You did twice.
And the vast majority. No, we're looking at a moment in time right now, and we're looking at the trends in politics, and we're seeing a rise in conspiracy theories, and we're seeing a rise in violence and extremist behaviors towards politicians. And I think the evidence shows that it's largely coming from fringe movements on the right. And I think it's important to call that out. And every party and every politician has a responsibility to be respectful in the way that they engage with their opponents. I don't agree with the ways that Liberal politicians in the past have behaved in the way you describe, and I don't think they should do that in the future either. But I think it's also fair to look at right now what is the cause of this, and if we just throw up our hands and say everybody's equally responsible, everybody does it, how do we actually solve the problem?
Go ahead, Andrew. Go ahead. Thank you.
I mean, I appreciate that, there's a lot of passion on these issues, and this is part of the reason why hot button issues often get talked about. But let's understand what the strategy is here. The reason that the choice issue is so important for the Liberal government to profile, and I would argue for the NDP, but particularly for the Liberals, is that women voters, the gender gap has closed significantly. The Liberals used to dominate the vote choice for women voters. That has now narrowed significantly, and in fact, in younger women, the Liberals are running third. And so what they really are trying to do is find a way to re-engage with that voter base that's traditionally been with them. This is a big hot button issue that draws attention back to what they see to be a fundamental divide. But that's really what they're trying to move. This isn't about a big principle debate. This is a political debate that's attempting to move a set of voters back out of one column into another. Now the principles unfortunately play into it, and this is where tempers rise. Is this any worse than what we saw during the pandemic, as people were, lining up on the vaccine or anti-vax sides, and the vitriol that was spewed back and forth about the motivations of Canadians? It's again a hot button issue that speaks to a different set of issues. But I think we need, for those of us that are here to opine a little bit on why this is happening, not just give our own opinion about whether we stand on it. I think being able to shed a bit of light on that helps to understand what the objective is.
Absolutely, and look, I promise I would add a little bit more from this statement I got from Mr. Poilievre, because in that clip package you just played, we saw Soraya Martinez-Ferrada, who's a cabinet minister, saying in Parliament that she left her native Chile and came to Canada to get a safe, legal abortion, as highlighting this issue. And obviously there is a tactic here by the Liberals today to force some pressure on the Conservatives on this. And what Mr. Poilievere's office has said, these outlandish claims show the true desperation of Justin Trudeau and his flailing Liberals. A common-sense Conservative government will not legislate on abortion and therefore would never use this section of the Constitution, being the notwithstanding clause pertaining to this matter. And a series of links where Mr. Poilievere has publicly said that he is pro-choice on this issue, and no Conservative government he leads will legislate restrictions on abortion. So I want to put that out there, as this is a topic. We try to peddle in facts, Shachi, on this show as much as we can, whenever we can. I just wonder what your thoughts are on the conversation that the guys were having.
You know, this has been a conversation really about the symptoms of the disease. We're talking about the symptoms. We've diagnosed the disease. I don't feel like we're talking enough. We all understand why we got here and how we got here, and maybe there's some differing views on exactly who did what to whom in year what. But let's talk about how we get out of what feels like a death spiral. Cameron referred to this as a moment in time. And Cameron, I sincerely hope for all of our sakes, for the country's sake, that it is a moment in time. But increasingly, it's not looking like a moment in time. It's looking like the new normal. And I worry about that. I worry about the fact that you've got the two major parties in this country fighting over something that is a fundamental right to women. But by the way, I can show you Conservative voting people, male or female, who are pro-choice. I can show you pro-life voters who will vote Liberal and sometimes will even vote NDP. These are issues that go across the spectrum a lot more than we realize, because the story of the day, the message of the day coming out of Parliament Hill and coming out of political messengers it gets so reduced. And then in our minds, we don't process it because we don't have all the facts. Canadians don't necessarily have all the facts about who thinks what about a lot of issues. And I see it over and over and over again in the data that we measure, that there is a good 50-60% of Canadians who straddle the spectrum on a lot of issues, who feel verklempt. They're almost silenced because there isn't a language or a way for them to express themselves, because the cacophony of voice on one side and on the other is so loud and so dominant. And leadership is actually about stopping that, about just hitting the brakes and saying, we're going to stop this, we're going to pause, we're going to take a reset, we're going to find a way through this. And yes, it may cost an election cycle. Yes, right. That is the reality. But something's got to give.
So Andrew, just to come back to you, close it off, this requires a conversation, right? A broader conversation. Conservatives won't come on this show when I'm hosting. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievere will belittle a Canadian press reporter who asks a question. That is a problem in having these conversations, So how do you do this when one side won't engage in certain forums, or will belittle in other forums? And sometimes when you do have Liberals on, for example, you just don't get the answers. You get relentless talking points, which you've seen in a couple of interviews on this show over the last couple of weeks. So Andrew, how do we move to this point where there's actually a conversation on substance without belittling and in good faith to try to fix things and move forward?
So there's an art to politics, right? And that's what I think we're all trying to figure out, is how do you, the big challenge today is the big problems are really complicated. They require nuanced solutions, and they're not things that, people easily dig into. It's why we've seen politics move back to values campaigns. Why the NDP's on their Eat the Rich campaign, why the Liberals are on, the vilification of the Conservatives as a Voldemort reborn, why the Conservatives are being, as outlandish as they are and casting the aspersions as wide as they can against, the broad left and the woke agenda. Those are pieces that people can grab onto without needing to articulate it. And we've gone too much into the shorthand of the politics without digging into what the issues are. Nobody's talking, none of the major parties are really talking about what to do about the productivity challenge. Very few are talking about what to do in terms of the growing inequality problems. Housing, we're getting more of a nuanced debate on, and there's actually strangely more of a consensus around it. That just makes really boring politics. And so that kind of is parked somewhere else now.
Right. Sorry, James.
That's the question. But anyway, that to me is the real question, is how do we start to bring that forward in a way that's digestible? How do politicians bring it, get challenged in a way that they need to actually start to drive real solutions?
James, I saw you waving. Go ahead, man.
Oh, I was just saying, you're talking about how conservatives don't talk. I think, if anything, you probably get emails and tweets from people saying, why are you letting James Moore talk so much?
You know what? I've gotten about a half dozen of those just during this conversation. I mean elected conservatives, the MPs. We asked the leader's office, they will not let them come on the show. Just the way it is.
Well, I don't know about that, but look, there are a lot of forums. This is one where people want to run problems. I think, look, at the end of the day, not to be Mr. Brightside here, but at the end of the day, I think when everybody seeks office, when everybody seeks to be premier, prime minister, mayor, member of parliament, what have you, what do they put forward? They put forward a smiling image, a positive agenda. They talk about their families. They talk about the communities that they grew up in. They talk about the country that they aspire to lead. So at the end of the day, yes, things get hot. They get hot as well because the public is angry and frustrated from time to time, and they need to see their emotions reflected in their political leaders. If political leaders get too hot, they'll pay a consequence for that. But I think ultimately the public, and politicians know this, the public wants people who are aspirational about the future. And the message on voting day from all the political parties is ultimately a positive one. It may not be from your perspective a positive thing, but the audience to which they're trying to reach is an audience that is, they think that the plurality of the public that wants to see either a change in government or a continuity of government, but something that is leaning forward in an optimistic way. So, not all messages are optimistic to all crowds, but ultimately politicians want to have enthusiastic support for them, and that's a good thing, and we will get there.
Cameron, I've gone over time. I'm going to give you a quick 30 seconds to just wrap it up.
I mean, I agree with James and a lot of what's been said. I think at the end of the day, what we should all, everyone who's involved in politics to some degree, needs to think about how we can attract more people to join. And I remember as a young activist on campus how hard it was to get young people to actually care and pay attention to politics, and that was a bit of a while ago. It's probably harder now with the level of toxicity and the degree to which politicians do tear their shirts apart and vilify each other. But I think the goal that we should all share, and I'm sure we all do, is partisanship isn't inherently a bad thing. Politics is something everybody should aspire to be a part of, and everyone should try and play a role in getting more people active and involved.
Okay, well, we'll try to end it on that positive note. I want to thank you all. Shachi Curl, James Moore, Andrew Thompson, and Cameron Ahmad. Thanks so much, gang.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.